This powerful series delves into the courageous efforts of local leaders, college students, and civil rights organizations that risk their lives to be at the forefront of this change. Through intimate interviews, historical archives, and stirring personal stories, this series reveals the profound impact of their struggle, the resilience of those who faced violent opposition, and the enduring legacy of their fight. From the tragic murders of 3 civil rights workers, James Chaney, a young Black man from Mississippi, Andrew Goodman and Michael Schwerner, 2 young white Jewish men from New York, to the creation of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. This series offers a compelling narrative of faith, coalition, solidarity, and music. Join us in revisiting this critical time in history where unity and determination sparked a nationwide movement for equality and justice that has shaped who we are today. In doing so, making us the keepers of this history and legacy.
When I think about 1964 and I think about what was happening with SNCC and Bob Moses and James Farmer with CORE, is that they rejected the notion of leadership. They rejected the notion of being individual leaders. Them too, it was Bob Moses who in 1961 brought the idea to folks, and everybody said, well, you're gonna be the coordinator, you're gonna be the project coordinator, right? And he rejected that. He was like, actually, this is gonna be a leaderful movement. We're gonna sit as a coalition, as a group of individuals, and we're gonna make collective decisions about the way in which we organize. And I think that's the power of organizing. It's what this generation does really well. It's decentralized.
I was told, and I think it needed to be said, that the leaders, the participants, like Baba Stokely, Carmichael, they didn't know how this was going to turn out. All they knew is we must do something. But they didn't know the outcome. They didn't know about the legislation, if it would even pass. They didn't know about the gains that were made. They had no idea. They knew their goals, but they didn't know how things were going to play out and whether it was going to be a success, but they were compelled anyway to act. And I think that, again, that embodies what we mean by faith.
One of the things that comes to mind for me is tikkun olam, with this Jewish principle of, the direct translation is like to heal the world, which requires recognizing realities and not shying away from things that might be uncomfortable to think about. And I think there's also this communal notion that when people come together with a shared sense of faith, whether that be religious faith or faith in something, faith in a shared vision of the future, that can be such an effective site for organizing and for building together.
First of all, there was the NAACP. In addition, there was the Congress of Racial Equality, which was an organization that was a coalition of a number of civil rights organizations. That was the primary organization with which we interacted during Freedom Summer. It was like jaw-dropping initially because, as I mentioned earlier, the only contact we had with white people was in stores. All of a sudden, here you had white students, male and female, living in the homes of Black people in our community. So we got to know them very well. Freedom School, we were there with them during the day, eating with them, playing with them, and they would do things like correct us when we would go, yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir. They would say, look, I'm 19, I'm 20 years old, I'm like you are. You don't have to say that to me. You can just talk to me as a person because I'm no better than you.
My first night of being in the home where I was going to be staying for a couple of weeks with this family, they had never had a white person sitting at the dinner table with them, and I had never sat at the dinner table with an all Black family. So I was nervous, uncomfortable, out of my element, and the food was great, and I was really enjoying eating, and I noticed their son, who's maybe 4 or 5 years old, staring at me. His mother noticed that he was staring at me, and she said, "Don't stare at the man. You know that's not polite." And he said, "But Mama, he eats just like we do." Oh man, it still gets me today to think back to that. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, in a loving family. My parents are Jewish. In fact, my father was a refugee from the Holocaust who came over here as an immigrant, just lucky to be able to escape.
Jews in America, in my grandfather's time when they came over, met black folks coming up from the south to the north in the ghettos. One was a group of foreigners, didn't speak English, and they met black folks in their neighborhoods, and they considered them Americans. They were what they knew of America. And when both groups realized that they could in fact fight to end oppression, they naturally worked together.
So my parents were German Jewish refugees from Germany, from Nazi Germany. They were sponsored by my uncle, and he agreed that he would be financially responsible for us. Otherwise, you couldn't get into the United States. It didn't matter what you were facing. I was raised in a refugee community of people who all had lost everything. I only realized it, years later, looking back, that I think I was looking to connect with people who understood that the world could be hazardous and that you needed to be aware of what was going on and you needed to figure out how to stand up against it.
When my grandfather died, I always thought he was, being Orthodox, he was very rigid. But when my grandfather died, there were 2 imams that came to his funeral. There was 2 Catholic priests and a bunch of other ministers. And I'm going, why are these people come to my grandfather's funeral? And it turns out that he had been communicating with them over the years to find out, to research, to look into the commonality of religious liturgy and singing between all the religions. And I thought, wow, my grandfather, who I thought was rigid, was open to all this. And that was a profound influence on me.
It started a lot with music, the civil rights movement songs on television. Thanks to some really conscious history, social studies teachers, I became aware of what was going on in the rest of the world. And the music really drew me in.
Talk to me about how music played a role in the movement in bringing people together.
When many of the civil rights leaders and foot soldiers of the movement were incarcerated, songs are what got them through.
I can think of the 1960s and the roaring 20s, the jazz age, where black people had an opportunity to use music as a stepping point to freedom and to communicating with people from all across the country. And so we think of places that were the home of that, like Nashville, Louisiana, and New York, and all these places that have become an epicenter for music. And there's so many people who came before us, like Nina Simone, who wrote the song Strange Fruit, that really transcribed a message that the world wasn't ready for. And you would see commonly these sort of musics being pulled off of the radio and different platforms and banned from different places, similar to what we see today with critical race theory and further in education when it comes to Black history, banning books, is because there's a key message that is fighting against the opposition, the oppressor, racism, whatever's happening in society. And there's an underlying message of freedom and liberation.
Movement without music is no movement. We had singing. Singing calms the fears. It creates a spirit in you that is something like a protection. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up the freedom land. Those were the songs that we would sing as we were marching, getting ready to go to jail. We don't have the old devotion, so all those old songs are not being heard today. I've been in the storm so long, and our freedom songs was taken from gospel songs, just rearranged. Woke up this morning with my mind on Jesus. We changed it. I woke up this morning with my mind on freedom.
When we were demonstrating and singing, we felt we were together. We were lost in the music. It was a way of taking the beatings and so forth. It was a way of meditating if you keep singing.
I grew up in a Jewish family, went to Jewish day school through 8th grade. Music has sort of soundtracked each era and each little pocket of American history. Music that resonates so much cross-generationally and like at times is music that comes from struggle. And it's really powerful in a way that people can hear a song and they figure out how to see themselves in it. And so that way for a song to bring people together and also bring a sense of nonviolence and calm and determination.
It's melody and lyrics, and it transcends and it translates beyond ways we even understand. So it's so powerful. It's such a gift. But you know, who is the Harry Belafonte today to organize the biggest artist in the world to sing something like that to help a whole bunch of people? I don't know. From the beginning of like Negro spirituals and hymns and church songs, and you know, very often that's how we communicate feelings and stories, is through songs, and songs like We Shall Overcome, especially in a time when music is so disposable. We're not seeing as many like evergreen songs anymore.
Before and after Freedom Summer, our democracy is really at its best when young people are involved. Sort of the same spirit and energy that Robert had when he was 20 and 21 years old, same energy that Andrew Goodman had at 20 and 21. It's the same energy I see in the campuses across the country that we work with now.
I was convinced the only way to end the McCarthy period and to really fight for progress was to join the Black community, which was at that time the major community fighting for change. They were facing fear. They were facing the sure threat of having their lands taken away, their homes taken away, being beaten, maybe being killed, fighting for their rights. They faced that with faith.
It's so important to understand the backdrop of what's happening in today's time, and also to acknowledge that there's just not one movement, but there's also movements happening in parallel. And I think there's an opportunity for us to really connect and talk to one another.
Beware the 1950s. Beware the 1940s. There is an entire group of very, very powerful and very wealthy people who will take you back to 1950. I lived through 1950. You don't want to be there.
I believe that if people get together and stay together, generally they lose. until they win.
I think for a lot of young people right now who are feeling incredibly frustrated, who are feeling disenchanted, who are feeling lonely, who are feeling like there's so much happening in the world and not feeling that they have any control of it, what you're saying is just a reminder that the work doesn't stop and there's still room to do so much more, and there's still room to be able to count your wins.
I remember in 1976 when I traveled to Egypt, and I'm standing there in front of the Sphinx, and what occurred to me was, it's just like they said in Freedom School, because we didn't have the benefit of learning a lot about African history, because that was one of the strategies that was used. You not only colonized the globe, but you colonized the knowledge. You go even further than that when you want to be an effective oppressor. You colonize the image of God. But we got glimpses of African history during Freedom School. Let's make them proud. Let's make them smile. Let's finish what was started. Let's resume the upward spiral of civilization, which was started by our ancestors.